Chickenfoot. Welcome to a new podcast we're calling Chickenfoot. This is a podcast about comedy and the root, the getting to the basics, dissecting comedy. Not necessarily a joke or jokes, but comedy in general. My name is Judah McNeil, also known as Judah Buddha, and I am joined by my longtime friend, good friend Arthur Spooner, also known as Joe. Joe,
What's up?
how you doing today, man?
Good. How you doing?
Not too bad. So thank you for joining me, man. So for those of you who are watching, this is just something that we've on and off been in dialogue together. We've always been, our relationship has a lot to do with discussion and breaking things down, talking.
Yeah.
And we love laughing together.
Yeah.
So we decided we should do a podcast. We'll see what it's like. I think it's very, like, for me, even if nobody tunes in, I'm curious to get into comedy. Joseph is one of the funniest guys I've ever met. He's the funniest guy I've ever met. There's a lot in the top. There's 5, in the top.
Yeah.
But you're definitely, I think you're number 1. And so I think this is you're the perfect guy to have on here and sort of discuss comedy. First thing I would like to know, you suggested it. What was your how did you come into comedy? What is your experience of comedy growing up now? How does it play into your life?
Well, I think with me, it's always been about my father. He was always, one of the funniest people, and he always had the funniest stories, and I would have him tell the same story over and over and over again. And I remember I must have been like in middle school, and I was like, you know what? I want to be able to tell stories like that. You'd be able to tell funny stories. So I kind of would think about his stories. I would retell his stories to my friends, and which is kind of weird. Like, this is what happened to my dad when he was a kid.
So you weren't telling him as if it was like happened to you. You were just talking about like third person, your dad.
Yeah. And I would just repeat the story as he would say it, as I could remember it. And then that would help me kind of, and then I would realize when people were laughing, they're always laughing at certain points. And then I would begin to think about, okay, when do you enter in the funny part? You're building and building and building, and then you hit boom, the funny part. So you got to like hide certain details, and then because if you release it too early, then part of what makes humor humorous is the surprise element. It's unexpected. It's not what you're used to seeing. Your connections that you never really saw. It's a part of it is like a surprise, unexpected element of it.
Absolutely,
and if you reveal too much, then you lose that. But you have to reveal enough to where it's like you're kind of leading them one way, but then you go.
You're keeping their attention. Yeah. And that's what I think the beginning stages of this podcast is really going to be us hypothesizing, right? Like this whole experiment, we could call it the Chickenfoot experiment, because it's like the whole thing is an experiment to kind of test our hypotheses about what makes a joke funny, what makes a story funny, what makes things funny. That's what comedy is,
and what effect it has on people.
Yeah, because that's the other thing is both of us are into psychology. Both of us do it, have done it, or do it for a living. And I think those are inexorable things, is psychology and comedy. Without understanding the psychology of comedy, you really can't get to the root of comedy.
Yeah.
Right? You got to start thinking about people and how people act and react.
Mm-hmm.
So you started with your dad. You started using his stories and sort of looking at his stories and noticing patterns.
Mm-hmm.
Give me some of some of the patterns that you noticed.
Well, he would always, like, the way he would tell stories, he would kind of be like the straight man, like Abbott and Costello, how you get the straight man.
Yeah.
And it was always kind of self-deprecating. So stuff was always happening to him, and it was just kind of like, but I also noticed he would exaggerate things, and sometimes the language would be, sometimes it's the words you're using, the type of words you're using. Just some words are just funnier than others. And that would set up the joke, and then sometimes it's just the surprise of it. I'm trying to think of like one story he would tell me. So he lived way out in the mountains, in the woods, on a farm in West Virginia.
Yeah.
And so like his next door neighbor was like a mile away. Like no joke. It was literally, and there was no paved roads. It was all just dirt, gravel, rocks, Yeah. And they were poor. So every year, and he grew up in a household with like, I think 8 brothers and a sister. So there was a lot of them, right?
Okay.
And he wasn't the youngest, but he was more on the younger side, younger half. But anyways, so when Halloween would come around, they would go to their one neighbor for the evening and have like a dinner Halloween party, right?
Okay, yeah.
And that's their only trick. That's the only trick and treat. It's just that, right? So they basically they had the same costumes, and they just had to use them every year, like a ghost with a sheet and a hole in it, like a hobo, and like stuff like that, a farmer.
Okay.
And so depending on the age and the size of the kid, it depends on what costume you got. So, and every year he'd go as the ghost, and they'd be like, "Who is that? Is that little Butchie?" He's like, "That's Butchie." Like, who else is it, right? And there's like the only family that comes, and he's always the same thing every year. He's like, "Yeah, it's Butchie."
His name is Butch. Yeah.
Yeah. So I always thought that was funny.
Yeah.
Because
That's funny.
they're trying to play up that, who is it? Who is this? Oh no, is that a ghost? But there's only one family and one group of kids are coming, so they knew who it was. But they're trying to give that experience. And as a kid, he realized that, I'm the same person. There's nobody else coming. I'm a ghost last year. I'm a ghost this year. I'll be a ghost next year. So for me as a kid, I thought it was hilarious.
Yeah.
And so that was one, because I didn't expect. As a kid, I didn't, because my experience is trick or treat is I go all over different houses. Yeah. So the idea of one house, one family, and they always know who you are, and you only have one costume, was hilarious to me.
Well, and that's always been your strength of comedy, has been mainly how you tell stories or how you act in, it's sort of a physical comedy. I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, but sort of a physical comedy, but a lot to do with stories, right? And like a turn of a word, or yeah, like you said, surprise. For me, it's always been more physical. It's always like the times that I've gotten the biggest laughs have always been physical, and it like you, it started with my dad. He always, like, making my dad laugh was like that was because my dad's unlike your dad. He's not, I mean, my dad's funny, but he was always much more of an intellectual, serious guy, like we're always talking philosophy, we're always talking like, and so getting him to laugh wasn't hard necessarily, it wasn't like he was some kind of stoic son of a, but he was a drill sergeant in the Army for a while, and he was, so he's got military background. and it's hard for me to go back. So he was much more serious, right? The older he gets, the way more funny and jovial, right? But,
Okay.
So I'm trying to think back, and he was a little bit more, no nonsense. And so getting him to laugh was always super, super important to me.
Yeah.
And he would tell stories like, excuse me, got some the things that he enjoyed or he laughed at when he'd tell a story that he thought was funny. It was always like me running through a pool or my brother running through a pool. So the main one that he tells now, I'm sure there's others, but the main thing he tells now, there's 2 times I made him laugh like doubled over. One was when we were at my grandmother's house, and we had this project. Everybody's my dad forced us to do this thing where we had to like get all the grass out of the sidewalk. And I'm like, son of a gun, this is my vacation, and I'm gonna be doing this where it's hot in New Mexico. And so I'm laying down on the ground, like on the sidewalk, and I'm like taking stuff out, and everybody's kind of close. We're all working on it. And all of a sudden, the neighbor across the street is like mostly old folks that live around, just starts pounding on their door, pounding. And I just stand up and say, "Come in." And he thought that was the funniest thing. It sort of broke the tension, but it turned out the lady had fallen. And she was like in serious trouble. She was like,
she was hurting, and she was like, "I need help." You're like, "Come on in!" And then the roar of thunder of laughing. She's like, "I'm hurting."
Yeah. So we ended up saving her. Actually, like we're laughing, but like it kept going. We're like, we better go check on her.
Yeah.
And the second time was when we were playing football, and we got the football stuck. We have trees that kind of line up a nice little football thing in my grandparents', which is now my dad's house. And there's just these big, tall hickory trees, and we got the football stuck. I don't know who threw the football up in the branches. Everybody trying to get it out with a slingshot and stuff like that. I said, "Guys, I know how to get it." And I just run as hard as I can and hit the tree, like a cartoon, and just
vibration will shake it.
Yeah. So like, obviously, like I knew it wouldn't work, but just for comedy, and my dad thought that was the most hilarious thing he'd ever, because like I hit it, bounced off, flopped on the ground, So a lot of my comedy comes from physicality.
Well, I think one thing I realized a long, long time ago is to build rapport with patients, or as I used to say it, get people to like you. Is if you can make them laugh, they'll like you.
Yeah.
There's something about making your father laugh. When I was a kid, I always tried. Maybe there were certain things that I did make him laugh, certain things, but I don't really remember anything in particular. But my dad is hard to make laugh. And I think mostly it had to be because he was our dad. So he didn't really see us the same. But now he is a little bit easier to laugh, because I think now he even though he's still our father and he's still our parent, I think he has a sense where he can let us be adults. And but he would just kind of do like that would be like the extent of his laugh, is like
yeah, interesting.
Because I always thought if somebody falls and trips, I don't think it's funny.
Really?
If somebody gets hurt, I don't think it's funny until the person is okay with it, and then I'll laugh.
Oh, okay.
I can't laugh, but I remember when we were in college and you were walking toward the chapel. I don't know if you remember this.
The banana?
Yeah, and you said, "Oh, look, guys, I'm going to slip on a banana." And you stepped on you literally caught air and landed right on your back. And I was like, whoa. I laughed so hard because that was I did not expect it, even though every cartoon tells you that that's the safety hazard with bananas.
Yeah.
But I was like, why is that like a thing? I don't know. And then
I showed why it's a thing.
You like flew. You got so much air, and you like fell. And it was like watching a movie. It didn't look real. That's how it was so funny.
I remember that instance, and I remember the same thing you're saying is like, cartoons do this, but why is it even a thing? You know, banana peels aren't slippery, and that's why I did it. You know, I was gonna pretend to slip, but it was so slippery. I just like, along with me pretending, I just landed on my back. The other time I got people to laugh, like Ford Suze actually. You know, from the Surfing Violinist podcast. Yeah, but you know Ford. He and I were walking back to back to the dorms, and there was this guy. I don't know if you remember him, but he was like definitely on the spectrum, and I don't want to speak ill of him. He just had a way about him, just very like, you know, he would get on these things. If you had him in class, he would just talk, you know, to the teacher and argue. Yeah. And he was arguing with us all the way back, like just really, I don't know. I can't even remember what his part was, but I just remember him being just like super annoying, you know?
Yeah.
And so he's talking, if you really, don't you think, you know, and shouldn't you, and blah blah blah. And so we're walking back, and I get to my dorm, and there's a 2-liter bottle, 2-liter like a milk carton full of water that was right outside my dorm room. I don't know, I can't remember why, but it was there. And I just turned to him and I said, "You just get me so," and I just went from zero. I was like 0 to 100, like anger, and I kicked that thing, and water just went everywhere. And then I just like, and then I went back to 0. I was like, haha, I'm just kidding, man, you know. And everybody was like, it was like I can go into like a fake rage really fast, but the water really helped, you know, like just kicked, the water just went everywhere. Just like, oh man, that's cool, you know, because he asked me a question, something like don't you think? I'm like, no, I don't think anything, you know, and like just started going crazy. It's like, oh yeah, you're right, dude, you know, whatever. And Ford just like fell down on the ground laughing.
Well, speaking of college, I mean, that's how you and I met.
Yeah.
And somebody told me once, I heard it somewhere, I don't know where or how, but somebody told me that the first people you meet in college, you'll be friends with them for your whole life.
Really? Interesting.
And then so I was determined to meet hot ladies. I'm gonna make sure I meet the hottest women, because if they're gonna be my friends for the rest of my life, I want the hot ones, right? So I'm in line to register, and then guess who was in front of me? Some guy was in front of me talking my head off, and I was like, I'm looking for the hot ladies. I was like, you turn around, man, you're ruining my chances. And next thing, Jude is standing there, and he's talking to me, and I remember we're joking around, and I was thinking, man, dude, this guy's like, ruin my chance. I'm gonna meet the ladies and stuff. And then we're joking around, laughing, and then we had to do the Bible test.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
I don't know. I guess we somehow accidentally got sat together, or maybe I saw you and I sat next to you or something. I don't remember.
I mean, you make it sound like I was talking your ear off. You were the one cracking. You were cracking jokes.
It was a little exaggerating, but part of me wanted to just meet women the first day, right? And the only person I met was you. There's not another person I talked to that will talk to me again for the rest of the day. And so you and I talked, and then we had to take the Bible test because we went to a private Christian college.
Yeah.
And then we maybe talked once or twice the next 3 years.
Well, we both were taking philosophy class. We were both in philosophy.
But I think that was our senior year.
Maybe, but we had a couple.
Then we had maybe a few classes together, and the only time I remember you and I talking was in the Gospel of John with.
I think we were in a sprinkle class together too.
Okay, maybe we were in classes, but we didn't hang out.
No, in fact, now that you say that, I remember there was we were in one of the sprinkle classes. Can you turn me down just a little bit? I hear myself coming back at me.
How do I turn you down?
Just turn down the volume.
Oh.
So
I'm trying to get my. All right, there we go. Come on, what the hell? There we go.
Test? Yes, I hear myself really well.
Give me a second.
You know you have a button on your keyboard.
Yeah, my keyboard's not right in front of me. How about now?
Test. Perfect.
Okay.
Actually, no, I still hear myself a little bit.
Because the microphone's next to the computer. I'll probably have to get some headsets. I'll get some headsets sometime.
All right. So, anyways.
All right. So you were saying?
So the only other time I remember talking to you was later on in the class. I look back at times when I was young and just cringe, just some of the things. But I remember you had like, unlike now, you had like just this perfect like bald head. Remember?
Yeah.
I mean, most of our life you've had that. This is a new thing. We'll talk about that later. But I remember. I don't know, like, please forgive me. I shouldn't bring this back up, but I wrote my name on my hand in like dark ink and I put it on your head, on the back of your head.
When was this?
We were sitting in class.
What year?
I was like a sophomore, junior, or something like that. Okay. And you were like, stop touching my head. And like, I was like, oh shit, why did I do that?
I remember, well, maybe this is what Joel, remember Joel Baker?
Mm-hmm.
And so he would do stuff to annoy me. And so how I would get him back is I would say it loud so that everybody would have to hear him and he'd be embarrassed. That was like my only recourse is I was like, quit touching me. Ow! Really loud like that. So that would be like my only recourse, because then he would stop, because then all of a sudden attention was drawn to him, because if you're just like quit, he's not gonna stop. So back then that was just what I would just do that. I don't know why in class. Yeah. But I don't remember that at all. I don't remember that. No.
I shouldn't have brought it up then.
I don't remember that. The only thing I remember, like I said, is we were in a couple classes together, and we were in Gospel of John with Collier.
Yeah.
And the tests were getting back, and he wrote on the board how many A's, how many B's, how many C's, and there was like 3 A's. And you were like, I bet you got the A, and I was like, no, I got a B. And you're like, really? And I was like, yeah. I was like, man, this guy thinks I'm smart. I was like, man, this guy thinks I'm smart. I should have went with it.
You were smart. You're always one of the top of the class because you always studied a lot and you're on your stuff.
Well, I looked at school different, I think, because I was coming out of the Navy.
Mm-hmm.
And so I remember what life was like in work. And most people were coming out of high school. Mm-hmm. So it was still like I was coming out of, I worked to get here, and I wasn't just going to diddle it away. Yeah. Where other, if I came from high school, I'd be like, still kind of high school mentality, but a little more evolved. So that was different.
Yeah, you definitely had a more serious approach to school. the next thing I would like to sort of transition us to is, so what is your hypothesis? What is your hypothesis of what makes things funny? What makes a joke funny? What makes a story funny? What is comedy?
So what I think, and I think humor, because you and I probably diverge on this one. So I think it kind of evolved to where it is now. So where it started is probably not what we think of it now.
Mm-hmm.
So I remember as a kid, and so this is all conjecture, and I don't really have any evidence on it. I've never really read any studies on what they think it's from, and some anecdotal stories that kind of led me to this. But I remember asking my dad as a kid if he cried when he got married. And he said that he laughed, that he was laughing. He couldn't stop laughing. The next question I should have asked was my mom is, what'd you think when you first saw Dad and he started laughing at you down the aisle? You know, but he was so anxious and nervous that was his response. So I think laughter kind of started as a way to handle surprise, intense emotions, and then it started getting associated with just surprise and unexpected things, and then I think it started getting closer to because we also have a sense of like a heart, where we wear a heart on our sleeve, we care about other people and stuff. So if something that is so detrimental to the other person that hurts them, we won't laugh. But if it doesn't hurt somebody, I think we perceive it as not being life-threatening or hugely ego-threatening, and it's unexpected.
Yeah.
Then I think we think it's funny.
Yeah.
And so that's how I think we got to where we are now with humor. And so part of the element of humor is you take a word and you use it in a way that you're not used to using it, or an idea that's associated with another idea that is a surprise association.
Yeah. I don't disagree with you on that. You're saying you think I'd disagree with you?
Well, I think because I was talking about like how evolutionarily it evolved, and I didn't think you would see it that way. I thought you would see it more as just innately, humor is the way we know it now has always been innately a part of us.
Oh,
the way we find that humor, things that we find funny, people 5,000 years ago still laughed.
Oh, well, I definitely don't think. Well, I think people from day one have laughed. I think there's been humor from day one. So yeah, I guess I do disagree with sort of that it is an evolved ladder evolution, almost technology. I think, like you said, though, it is something that is in us that is in response to, it is a defense mechanism, in the sense that even all over the world, the smile is part of culture. And even animals, like they've shown studies that chimpanzees or apes or chimpanzees, I think, I don't know what the study shows, but I've heard that chimpanzees smile when they're surprised or in danger, as a defense mechanism that something about it will diffuse situations, or maybe showing their teeth, is scaring away.
Well, if it does reduce anxiety of sorts, then not only is it doing it for you, but being able to see somebody exhibit those signs is probably going to reduce it in the other person. So that's why I always think it's a good icebreaker, is everyone's kind of has some anxiety about meeting somebody new. Person going to like me? They're going to accept me as I am? Is this going to be awkward, or is there going to be connection? But if you make somebody laugh, then there has to be some sort of like, and also, not only is it bringing down the anxiety, but you know that if somebody can laugh, there's some sense of balance to them. You know, like they have some sense of healthy lifestyle. Like
there's something about good humor, having a good sense of humor that is healthy.
Yeah. Because because humor manages emotions. You could probably use it as a way to kind of deflect and avoid emotions too. But I think it's also a way to process emotions.
Well, two things you said sort of sparked something in my head. The first thing, when you said making other people laugh, Scott Adams. Do you know who Scott Adams is? He wrote Dilbert, the cartoon Dilbert, and he's got a podcast and stuff like that. But he said once, he was talking about speaking in front of people and how the difference between when people clap for you and when people laugh at something you said. He said there is something just powerful about being able to make a group of people, or to make anybody laugh. He said that is a connection that you have with that person, that if they clap for you, it's like they're doing you a favor. But if they laugh at something you said, then you have connected with something on a personal level.
Yeah, well, you know, it's interesting where you're saying that. What I was thinking, what I was hearing you say was difference between laughing and clapping is really when you make somebody laugh, you're engaging in an innate emotional response. You know, I mean, somebody can fake laugh, but you can tell when someone fakes that.
Right.
But if somebody claps, they have to consciously say, you know what, this is something I'm going to give them.
Right.
Where if you laugh, they're not consciously saying, I'm going to give them this, but you're emotionally expressing some enjoyment, and it's almost like you cause them to do it.
Right. They can't. It's like it's evidence of real enjoyment. Whereas if you clap, it's like, well, anybody can clap. It's something
like a reflex. Like, you know, when you hit your knee, and it just like you could jerk your knee on your own, but if you hit it in the right spot, it's gonna jerk.
Right.
You know.
Yeah. And then the second thing what was the other thing you were saying after that? I can't remember. But yeah, that was the first thing when you're talking about making people laugh and making a connection with people. I think the other thing was intelligence. It's it's a sign of intelligence when you have a sense of humor. It's automatic. I believe that people, it's an automatic sign for people that your intelligence, maybe not in the sense of like E equals MC squared, but in the sense of you're able to navigate the social game in a way that you have enough confidence and control to be enjoyable, for one, and to be able to manipulate what's going on. Because if you're making people laugh,
because there has to be some lateral thinking where you're making leaps that isn't, it's connected to what you're saying, but it isn't connected in the context of what you're saying. So like if you say something, I'm like, oh yeah, that's a true story. Boop. Right? So you knew I'm talking about Pinocchio, but nothing in what I'm saying is Pinocchio, but the noise and the thing, the hand is gesturing Pinocchio. So if you don't know, you've never heard of Pinocchio, you're going to be like, what is that all about? Yeah. And then, so there has to be some intelligence where you're pulling from other areas.
Right.
And what I said and what I did, they're connected because sarcastically saying, oh yeah, that's a true story. Boop, because this means lying. Right. Yeah. So, but I'm not saying, oh, you liar.
Right.
I'm saying that's a true story sarcastically, and then I add something that tells that you're not telling something true, but you can't just get there by what I'm saying. You have to have some lateral thinking to connect the dots from what I just did to what I said, there's a connection there that wasn't intended. On the face of it, you didn't think we weren't expecting that to happen.
Yeah, and somebody watching that scenario happen, whether they think it consciously or subconsciously, I think there's an acknowledgement, or at least an understanding that that person with humor has broader horizons.
Yeah.
Is able to make bigger connections, like you said, leaps from one thing to another, and able to communicate you in a more complicated and subtle way.
Yeah.
And especially if you're able to use sarcasm without being a jerk, like that's you know, the subtlety of being able to use sarcasm and still be funny and, you know, not like tick people off is like, there's an intelligence, there's a you know, like
there's emotional stability with the other person. Like, so you and I will razz each other, and I can make a joke about you that if I just made to a stranger, you'd be like, yikes, like ouch, you know?
Yeah.
But with you, I can do it because there's that emotional stability of our relationship that's there.
Yeah.
That it'll allow you to push the humor a little bit further, and you can kind of get away with it a little bit more. And it almost kind of makes the humor still new and youthful, you know?
But I've noticed that if you meet a stranger and you recognize intelligence in them, if you can use, I'll use I statements, if I can use sarcasm in a way that makes them say, okay, you know, like in a way that like sort of degrades them a little bit, but not enough to offend them. Like if you can walk that line between mean and funny, then I'm able when I talk to new people of intelligence, I'm able to catch their attention way faster.
Yeah.
And I appreciate people that I can do that with much more as well.
Yeah. You know, when I do groups, you know, I have rules of the group, you know, everybody follow. One of the rules is you have to use I statements, like you were saying.
Yeah.
And so
I would always prefer in everything we do. Yeah.
Yeah. So I would pass out the rules and someone will read it and then they go on to the next one. They pass it on, so and so and so. So I'm just going to make up a name, you know, just for confidentiality reasons.
Yeah.
So they'll read number 3 and then they'll say only use I statements. And then I'll say, well, what does that mean? And they'll say, only talk about yourself. And then I'll say, okay, everybody heard it. Just talk about Mr. Johnson. That's all. And some people will laugh. Some people won't laugh, you know, because they're not like seeing what I'm joking. But I think, well, one, addiction is a serious thing, so not many people are joking.
So just to let people know, if you're watching, you don't know, so Joseph is an addiction counselor.
Yeah, addiction therapist at the VA. So so not many people are going to use humor in that setting, so I don't think they expect it. But I think there's an appropriate way you could use humor that makes it appropriate, so that it kind of it just makes it normalizes their experience in the clinic. At least I think that's what it does.
Well, like we've been talking about, it makes a deeper connection, and it makes it faster. I think you can make this deeper connection without humor, but it gets there faster because like you said before, it triggers an automatic reaction rather than like something that takes a lot of effort and a lot of
because there's something said that if you know somebody's faking it, it's very distasteful to you when you tell a joke and you know someone's like and there's something distasteful inside of you because it's like you were expecting some enjoyment out of the automatic response from them, but when they fake laugh, you are annoyed. If they don't laugh, you're just kind of like awkward.
Yeah, but when it hits and when you meet somebody else who has similar, especially somebody who has similar humor, is I'll say as I do. I remember we got a new counselor. So I used to do, until very recently, did school counseling, a program in a school, Becoming a Man. And we got a new counselor. He was going to share the office with us. And let me see. And so when he first came in, I was like, what is this guy going to be like? I hope he has a good sense of humor. And somehow I caught on that he did have a good sense of humor. And he came in, and the supervisor showed him around. He's like, "This is Judah." I'm like, "Hey, how you doing?" And I was like, "Oh," so he said, "Okay, so where's my desk?" And like, there was this like tiny little desk in the corner that we used for coffee, but the coffee pot wasn't on there at that time. And I was like, "Oh yeah, newbies get that one over there." And I like looked him right in the eye, kind of like threateningly. But then we both just like cracked up.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
If he hadn't, and he ended up having very similar comedy to you and I, probably more to you, but he, it's just funny. What was I going to say? So he could, if he had just been like, "Oh, that's a very small desk.
Yeah.
I was hoping it would be big," like. Then I would have been like, "Oh, this guy's not going to get along."
Yeah.
It's not going to take, it took me too literally. And that's another thing, is taking things literally. It's amazing. I would say I take for granted the fact that that we speak so often. We communicate on a, like you were saying earlier, with a whoop, on a different plane than the obvious, than the immediate literal things that we're saying and doing.
Yeah, because it's definitely so much more is being communicated with laughter and than just straightforward dialogue, and I think that's what makes human relationships so dynamic and deep, is that you're communicating on various levels at the same time. And you're saying things that you're not saying but are implied, so you have to do some lateral thinking, you know what I mean? And if someone is just always literal, they're very serious, you miss those. At least when I meet people who are very serious and don't really don't or take life too seriously, I don't feel like I'm connecting with them,
right?
Kind of like that pastor mentality, where someone's a pastor and they'll kind of laugh, like lighthearted laugh, but not really engage in full laughter with something. And they'll kind of engage you with their life, but not really delve too much information about themselves, because they, you know what I mean? Like they don't want to reveal a lot about themselves.
Like canned friendliness.
Yeah. You don't feel connected to them. You feel they're a pleasant person.
Yeah, but there's like that ready-made pleasantries about them.
Yeah.
Well, I work with, to let the audience know if anybody's watching. So Joseph is a addictions counselor. I work with young men mostly, and most of the young men I work with in my private practice are on the spectrum, on the autistic spectrum. And so one of the biggest problems is being able to have that 3D, or like you're saying, move laterally, move outside of the just literal.
Yeah.
Everything is taken literal. Now, that is you'd think, so at the lower levels it's really difficult, but most of the guys I work with are what used to be called Asperger's, or high function on the autistic spectrum. And so, but I think one of the best things I do is teach them comedy.
Now, what do they normally laugh at? What kind of material would they laugh at, or they think is funny?
Very slapsticky type stuff.
Okay, slapsticky
stuff that they can. It's stuff that is obvious. So when I first
Three Stooges.
Three Stooges type stuff. Yeah, but even that is like, yeah. I think Three Stooges type stuff.
And then you got the funky noises like bonk,
beep boop, beep boop.
Yeah.
That stuff is still funny to them, but making jokes is difficult. Being funny between, and that's the thing that with some of them, I've had to explain to them that just saying fart or poop or something sexual, is not can go downhill real fast, especially getting into the sexual. Because they watch comedians and that's all about sex, and and so they come in the car and they're like, about to,
yeah.
I'm like, dude, that's super inappropriate.
They're pulling a Michael Scott, Chris Rock routine. Where it's like he doesn't quite get that. Maybe it's funny, but that doesn't mean that it's appropriate for everybody and every time.
But it does seem, when you're listening, I appreciate comics much more when they don't use. To me, sexual jokes are often, unless they're very complicated or clever, it's typically just the same. It's the same level as a fart joke to me. It's like, the reason, and that's another part of my hypothesis for comedy, is being uncomfortable. So it gets into what you're saying. How it's a way to cope with being uncomfortable or being in danger. I think being uncomfortable. And also what you're saying about timing, like not releasing everything until the right time, it's like building tension. Like, what's going on here? This is uncomfortable. Oh, he was joking.
Yeah.
It's so that was the thing I was going to say is relief. Relief can often, to me, be a huge trigger mechanism in comedy.
Yeah.
To be able to build some awkward tension, but the problem, so they were catching on to, some of the guys I work with were catching on to the like building the awkwardness, but there was no relief.
Yeah,
there was no like. So a lot of times, what can be really good is the, oh, that's not what I meant. What were you thinking? That can be funny, and I often use that kind of approach where. It's the double entendre where you're building uncomfortableness, but you release it. There's the release. There's the relief of what but it's okay because we both know what's really going on. We're just joking type thing. But they would just come in, both barrels blazing. Man, I'm F you in the, like, oh, come on. Like throwing the P word everywhere.
Yeah.
Oh,
I agree that it is a sense of release. It's like when you're laughing so hard where you can't breathe and it almost hurts, and you're crying. And then to be able, when you're done laughing, it's like a cleansing. There's other stuff that you just kind of were able to let go because you had such a good laugh. It let so much other emotions kind of go, so much tension inside go. So, I think that's funny. For some reason, I don't know why this came to my mind, but when I was in high school, me and my friend Chris, what we used to do is is if somebody walked behind you, say like somebody's walking behind me and I go, what the? Like they pinch my butt. So they'd be walking and I just be like, what the? Like they pinch my butt and everybody else is like, just he's like, holy cow. So they just, and I don't know why we started doing that or why I even thought of that right there. But that's what we used to do when we were kids. Well, we have like 10 minutes left.
Yeah. Well, that I was going to wrap us up. I do, next time we meet, I do want to talk about, and we'll meet again next week. We'll be meeting every week. I do want to talk about, remind me to bring up the what the, because I think there's something especially, and we're going to talk more, get into all this stuff, generational stuff and all that, but our generation and what the, so put a pin in that.
Let's close with, like we can tell funny stories. So every time we do it, like the last 10 minutes, we dedicate to a funny story.
Okay.
If you don't have one, that's all right, because sometimes it's tough. But if you think of funny stories, start like jotting words to recall. So
that's good. Like we have to if we have it or not, we have to end it with a funny story.
Okay, so I have one.
Okay.
With because I was just talking about my friend Chris in high school.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if I told you this one where we used to work at McDonald's together.
Mm-hmm.
Me and my friend Chris, did I ever tell you this?
I don't know.
So we did VOTEC. So we did that for 3 weeks. And then we did normal public school for 3 weeks, right?
VOTEC is what, like a vocational
technical school.
Okay.
So he did carpentry. I did graphic arts. And when you're a senior, you can get a job, and instead of going to school, you can get a job doing that and get paid. So he was out on a construction site doing carpentry, and during the 3 weeks of vocational technical school. But then when we went back to the 3 weeks of public school, he and I worked at McDonald's, right?
Okay.
So it was the last day he was working at McDonald's for 3 weeks because he was going to vocation. And so I went to McDonald's, to get him, and we walked back to his place, and he's like, all right, let me go take a shower. So, and what he used to do was he would just take his McDonald's clothes and he'd throw them in a duffel bag, and he'd just leave them there. And then 3 weeks later, he would just put them on and he would go to work. Like, he wouldn't wash them or anything.
Oh.
And so he wanted to see how long he can go. So that day, I mean, it's 3 weeks until he works again. So that day he threw it in there. He's taking a shower. And I said, you know what I'm going to do? Is I'm going to tie all his clothes in a knot. So I took the pants legs and I tied each leg in like a really tight knot, each leg. And I took his shirt and I tied it in a knot. And I took his hat and I like crumpled it, like the bill was all like this. And then I just stuffed it in his bag, like really tight in a corner. And I just left it there. And we go out, and of course I'm laughing to myself because I'm just thinking what's going to happen. But I forget about it. Totally forget about it. 3 weeks later, I come into work, and I'm walking in the back, and Chris comes storming around the corner. His pants were like high waters because they were so wrinkly that they like were above his socks. So you can see his socks here. They just stayed up. And then his shirt wouldn't tuck in. So like the sides were like coming up past his belt because it was so wrinkly that it wouldn't tuck in, and his hat was all crooked. He's like, man, how am I going to get you back for this? Because he was telling me he got late to work, and he's like, all right, well, I'll just hurry up and change it. He gets down there, and it's the grease, like kind of like crusted in the 90s. Like trying to pull it apart, hurry up, get dressed, and the knots were still knotted up the fabric. So like when he put his pants on,
man,
his leg would be here, and the pants would be like this high, and so he would tell me that the manager's like, Chris, you need to go home and get changed. Go home. And he's like, look, if I go home, I'm staying home. So I walk around the whole shift with this really god-awfully wrinkly shirt and pants.
Oh, mercy. That's a good one. Oh, tell a story. Well, I can tell the story. I'll tell the story. You already know the story, but just kind of play along. So I used to work at an agency, and so since you told a prank story, I'll tell a prank story. I used to work at a big agency, counseling agency, where everybody had like their little cubicle.
Yeah.
And then we'd have a couple rooms for counseling people. If we worked with young people, so there's rooms with TVs and stuff where we'd do counseling, we'd do supervision and counseling. Well, I came in on April 1st. It was, April Fool's Day, so I really want to do it. So I went into work really early, and only the supervising, the director, Nancy, was there, and she was in her office. I said hi, and I started looking around and said, what can I do? And so I thought, oh, I know what I could do. So I started taking everybody's chair. And it's something, I don't know how it dawned on me, but I realized how important our chairs were at work. So I was like, oh yeah, I'm taking these chairs. So I started taking they're all rolling chairs. I took them and I put them in one of the main counseling rooms. And I was like, how am I going to keep people from discovering these chairs? And so what I did is I brought a radio in there and I turned on the radio, not loud enough you could really hear what was going on the radio, but just enough so you hear somebody talking. Close the door, and on the outside put in session. And everybody started coming in, and I brought my chair in there too, and I'm like, oh, I can't find my chair, and like maybe they're over here, and people started helping me trying to find my chair, realized their chair was missing, and they started going around like, where are the chairs? I think, and somebody was like, I think they're in that room, and they went over to the room, and because they checked everywhere else.
They
went into that room. It says in session. You hear like the radio going on. So I was like, oh, I don't know what I'm gonna do. And this went on for like hours. And I was just sitting there, like just trying to hold it together, while everybody's just really getting frustrated. But then the joke was on me, because I'm like, the longer it goes, the more angry they're gonna be at me when they realize, because at this point they're really angry, but they're like, it's a counseling session, someone's getting help, and when they find out it's just the radio, they're gonna come at me pretty hard. And so I had to like figure out like how long am I gonna let this go, and ended up going not too long, probably like a half an hour. You were there. Do you remember how long?
Yeah, I do remember. And I remember going to the door and I was thinking, this is kind of weird, because one, it's so early in the morning. Who is in there so early to have like a full-on meeting like that? And then two, who's in the meeting? Because everybody's looking for their chair, right? I don't understand. And I remember standing at the door, because your chair, say like this would be your chair, and the door would be like over here. And I remember standing there looking, and like, I mean, there's noises, and you would just be like, yeah, I don't know. Your desk, yeah, I don't know. Like you wouldn't look, you had your own thing, you're doing your thing, and you
I did keep my chair, right? Or did I put the chair?
So you're
I did keep it.
And you're like sitting back in your chair and you're on your computer and stuff, and everybody's like, is there a meeting? You're like, no.
Oh man, that was good. I guess, yeah, it's funny. So we both resorted to funny prank stories. I think that should be incorporated. We should start thinking about why that is, as we start to hypothesize or test the hypotheses of what comedy is.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that was good. Any final thoughts?
No. I think this has the potential to have some good stuff, and maybe we can do like the last 10 minutes of the story, we can call like a special story time or something.
I think it forced us to be funny.
What we could do, but I'm open, and I'm gonna try to keep a list of funny stories, so we'll have something.
All right, and starting next time, you have to start with a joke.
A joke or a story?
One of us has to start with a joke.
Okay.
Do you want me to do it, or do you want to go first? I'll go.
Okay.
And so next week, to open us up, I've got to tell a joke, and it may be funny. Look, we're gonna have so many jokes by the end, we're gonna run out, and it's gonna be hit or miss. But I think sometimes when we tell a joke that isn't funny, there's a lot to mine from that.
Yeah.
And that's a whole episode, is talking about the unfunny joke. If you want to get into some Norm Macdonald type approach, so anyways, this has been good. We're gonna also have to think of a sign out. What do we say to end? Something funny, obviously. We'll have to think of it.
Yeah, we'll have to think of something, but we have the beginning is Chickenfoot with the chicken noise, and we'll get our laughs somehow edited into it,
and eventually we'll tell everybody why we call it Chickenfoot, but not today. All right.
It was a failed joke on my part, which I thought was funny, and you didn't laugh.
Really? All right. Well, don't tell now. We'll tell.
All right.
Keep people guessing.
All right.
That's the hook. So for Judah Buddha, Arthur Spooner, we're signing out, saying,
"Hasta la Snora."